city's guardian. The people offered various sacrifices, music, and dancing. In return, they hoped the god would grant them prosperity and happiness and peace for their city. It should be mentioned here that in 1904, the townspeople of Franklin were rather shocked by the nudity in the murals. Juglaris was asked to return to Franklin and paint more clothes on the people. He did this by adding a flowing robe here and there, although not too many, as you will see. Franklin's sense of dignity was somewhat restored, and the new library was opened. Here we see the bearers of offerings who will join the main procession. The one with the urn has the libation that is a sacrificial liquid or oil. One figure carries the burning embers for the fire, and a third carries the offering of fruit. 3 girls are tending the sacred fire to be used in the ceremonies. They are up on a hill near the city and temple, with hills and valleys shown in the background. One holds the urn that will contain the embers to be carried to the temple. The procession begins in the early morning. A maiden views the procession as it leaves the gateway on its way to the temple. The temple is seen in the distance, and the head of the procession is seen coming from the gates of the city. Then, a votive bearer, singing and dancing girls in flowing robes, the leader of the musicians, and an assistant priest pass up the stone steps leading through the temple groves. Finally, we see the priests and assistants and the bearer of the emblem of authority being led by the chief of ceremonies, who is descending a flight of stone steps. The procession continues with various members watching from the temple steps as others continue towards the altar. The dancers form a circle waiting for the chief of ceremonies. Maidens and attendants of the temple carry the offering. Finally, upon arrival at the temple, we see the high priest seated on the throne, surrounded by the soothsayer, prophets, and assistant priests. In front of him is the sacrificial altar, the sacred fire, and a lamb ready for sacrifice. A priestess in front of the group gestures readiness for the ceremony, while the chief of ceremonies gives commands to an assistant. Over the fireplace are 2 separate panels showing the bearers of wine for the feast that will follow the sacrifice and complete the festival. Here we see the coming of the high priest, attended by an African slave girl and an attendant of the temple. The relief over the fireplace also depicts a procession. It's kind of a mini version of what we just saw in the Juglaris mural. In 100 years, the fireplace has never actually had a fire in it, which is fortunate because it's only there for show. It is not actually a working fireplace. The library never needed it as a heating source, so the fireplace has simply been a beautiful focal point. The woodwork is a warm, rich-colored mahogany. Notice the ionic columns with volutes and egg and dart design along the base of the capital and the dentil molding. Bead molding and rope and bead molding surround the perimeter of the room. The bronze-colored molding that we see in a scroll and honeysuckle pattern and the cornice molding are known as anthemion. The reproduction chandeliers were added in the late 1980s. Library staff have been overheard calling them flying saucers. These light fixtures can actually be lowered from the ceiling for the purpose of cleaning. These beautiful lamps are original to the library and were restored in the late 1980s. Back in 1904, one of these lamps sat on every table in the reading gallery. During the Revolutionary War period, our town was the first in the country to honor Ben Franklin by naming our town after him. 7 years later, the Congregational Church in Franklin was building a new steeple and in need of a bell. The pastor, Dr. Nathaniel Emmons, suggested asking Benjamin Franklin to donate a bell for the steeple. Fortunately for us, Ben had a different idea. Instead, he donated books to open a little parochial library. Franklin advised the town to accept books instead of a bell, in his words, sense being preferable to sound. While the Franklin Public Library building, as it stands today, is only 100 years old, the books which represent the beginning of the library collection originated in 1785 when Benjamin Franklin donated the books. Dr. Emmons cataloged the books in the parish library of the Congregational Church. Only members of his parish were allowed to borrow the books. A 1789 town vote deemed the collection public, allowing all Franklin citizens to borrow the books, free and without subscription or in town over the years. They represent America's first public library collection. One of our town's most famous sons, Horace Mann, was born in Franklin in 1796 and completed his early education in town. He was an avid borrower of the Franklin collection. Horace Mann is known as the pioneer of public education for his efforts toward reforming education and establishing teacher training schools in Massachusetts. The red brick schoolhouse is shown in its earlier days and was painted with a technique known as reverse glass painting. Local artist Pauline Richardson donated this picture to the library. Here we see another reverse glass painting of Benjamin Franklin. It's so lifelike, he almost appears to be watching over his books. This stairway was built, along with the elevator, when the addition was constructed in the late 1980s. Prior to this time, the building contained an iron spiral staircase that led to the upper floors, one of which had a glass floor. The glass floor was designed to allow additional light to flow throughout the building. By the late 1980s, it was unsafe and had to be removed. The floor downstairs is original brick. Back in the early 1900s, there was a gravestone company located in Franklin. Rumor has it that one of their masons couldn't spell very well. Every time he misspelled a word on a gravestone, no one wanted it. Now we are, after all, New Englanders who don't waste a thing. Some of these misspelled gravestones were used in building the library's foundation. They were discovered during the renovation of the late 1980s. It is a place of knowledge, discovery, and adventure. Once located in the current history room, the children's room was relocated to its bright and friendly location as a result of the 1987 building renovation. It is vaulted with a variety of panels decorated with anthemion. There are gentle arches dividing the vaulted ceiling. We can almost imagine the elegant events that took place here nearly 100 years ago. The S-shaped grillwork on the windows adds a softness to the room, and the elaborate heat registers are another unique feature. Welcome to the original children's room that was in use until the late 1980s. At that time, the larger children's area opened down the hall. Many Franklin residents have fond childhood memories of time spent in this room. Today it houses the library's historical collections and serves as a preservation area, so it is not open to the general public. Over the fireplace is a portrait of Nathaniel Emmons and his second wife, Martha. Here we have the original built-in tables that surround columns. A narrow stairway brings us to the upper floors.